January 1944. The Allies faced a seemingly insurmountable obstacle in Italy. Monte Cassino, a rocky outcrop crowned by a centuries-old Benedictine monastery overlooking the Liri Valley and the main route to Rome. For months, Allied intelligence had suspected that German paratroopers had turned the historic abbey into a near-impenetrable fortress. What few knew at the time was that the hill would become the stage for one of the most grueling, confusing, and deadly battles in the Italian campaign. U.S. forces, primarily the 36th Infantry Division, were assigned the task of advancing through the rugged terrain leading up to Cassino. The soldiers faced harsh winter conditions, freezing rain, and mud so deep it swallowed vehicles and slowed infantry to a crawl. Italian hills, carved with narrow valleys and winding roads, favored the defenders. German forces under General Fridolin von Singer, UND Ederlin, had expertly prepared the Gustav Line, using the monastery's height for observation, artillery coordination, and defensive ambushes. Every step forward was met with machine gun fire, mortar barrages, and the constant threat of hidden mines. The human toll was immediate and brutal. Private Robert McLean of the 36th Infantry kept a diary during the advance. "We marched through mud, cold, and death. Every hill, every bend in the road seems to hide the enemy. I don't know if we'll reach the monastery alive." Soldiers described the constant tension of moving through terrain where a single misstep could mean death. Supplies struggled to reach frontline units. Rations and ammunition were often days late, forcing units to ration both food and bullets. Commanders wrestled with the challenge of synchronizing multinational units, British, American, and eventually Polish forces, while under relentless fire. The tactical difficulty went beyond the physical landscape. Intelligence about German troop positions was fragmented, and aerial reconnaissance was hampered by poor weather and cloud cover. Planners debated whether to attack directly or attempt flanking maneuvers, knowing that either choice could result in catastrophic losses. General Mark W. Clark, commander of the U.S. Fifth Army, was acutely aware that capturing Monte Cassino was not only strategically vital, but also politically significant. Rome, the symbolic heart of Italy, awaited the victor. Yet the risks were staggering. Amid the chaos, secret reconnaissance missions began to emerge. Small teams of U.S. Army engineers and scouts were sent to map the enemy's fortifications and locate hidden artillery positions. Many of these soldiers never returned. Rumors swirled among troops about missing patrols, lost in the labyrinth of rocky cliffs and German tunnels. These disappearances added an eerie layer to an already terrifying campaign, underscoring that the war's deadliest elements were not always visible on maps or in reports. Strategic insight from this early stage revealed a stark lesson. Intelligence without execution is fragile, and bravery alone could not overcome well-prepared defenses. Diaries, reports, and post-battle analyses all emphasize that coordination between units, understanding terrain, and timing were as critical as firepower. Historian John Keegan later wrote, "Monte Cassino demonstrated the terrible price of underestimating the defensive advantage of terrain and the human cost of even the most carefully laid plans." For modern viewers, the story of Monte Cassino's opening chapter offers more than historical curiosity. It is a reminder that preparation, courage, and adaptability are indispensable in any high-stakes challenge. The soldier's struggle resonates beyond the battlefield. In moments of uncertainty, success often depends on the combination of information, timing, and collective effort. As January gave way to February, U.S. forces were only beginning to feel the full weight of Monte Cassino. Hundreds of men had already fallen, many were missing, and the fortified monastery loomed above as an enigmatic and deadly objective. The first assaults hinted at the months of struggle to come, leaving a lingering question among soldiers and planners alike. Could this fortress be taken without paying an unbearable cost? The answer remained uncertain, and the shadow of Monte Cassino hung over the Allied campaign like a silent, ever-present sentinel, ready to test every ounce of resolve in the days ahead. By late January 1944, the initial momentum of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division had slowed to a crawl. Every advance toward Monte Cassino was met with devastating German fire. The soldiers were exhausted, wet, and hungry, trudging through mud and snow, while artillery shells tore through the rocky hillsides. The human cost mounted with each failed assault, and morale began to fray. The terrain compounded the struggle. Narrow valleys, steep ridges, and winding mountain roads allowed German defenders, primarily Fallschirmjäger paratroopers and elements of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, to channel the American forces into kill zones. Tanks and artillery were often ineffective on the steep slopes, and supply lines were dangerously exposed. Troops reported being pinned down for days, unable to move without risking annihilation. One sergeant noted in a letter home, "We fight in the shadow of Cassino. Every step feels like a mile through hell. Yet we have no choice but forward." Coordination between Allied units became a critical challenge. The British 13th Corps was tasked with flanking maneuvers, while the U.S. Fifth Army attempted frontal assaults. Miscommunications and conflicting orders led to confusion on the battlefield. Lessons from this period emphasize that even well-trained soldiers could falter if command structure broke down or if terrain and enemy defenses were underestimated. Field reports stress that the hill fights itself, and the general's map is no match for the rocks and snow. Amid the chaos, secretive reconnaissance missions continued. Small U.S. Army teams were sent to scout German bunkers, tunnels, and artillery positions, often under cover of night. Some patrols never returned, leaving empty tents and abandoned equipment as grim evidence. Soldiers whispered about men vanishing into the hills, a mystery that added fear to already tense conditions. The operations were dangerous, but they provided vital intelligence for future attacks, showing that knowledge was sometimes worth more than brute force. The tactical and human lessons of this stage were clear. Preparation and courage alone could not overcome well-positioned defenses, and intelligence, both complete and incomplete, could determine the outcome. Historian Carlo Dest later reflected, "The failure of early assaults at Monte Cassino was not a failure of will, but a failure to fully understand the ground and the enemy." Modern viewers can see the relevance. In complex operations, whether in business, science, or warfare, situational awareness and careful coordination are often as critical as raw effort. As February 1944 drew on, U.S. forces faced the bitter truth. Monte Cassino would not fall quickly, and each day brought new casualties, confusion, and unanswered questions. Missing patrols and the seeming invisibility of German defenses created an atmosphere of tension and fear. The Allies had gained a foothold in the hills, but the monastery above remained untouched, its shadow stretching across the valley, a silent reminder that months of struggle and mysterious disappearances still lay ahead. February 1944 brought a new, more dangerous phase to the Monte Cassino campaign: secret reconnaissance and covert operations. Small teams of U.S. Army engineers, intelligence officers, and scouts were sent into the German-controlled hills to map bunkers, locate hidden artillery, and identify supply routes. These missions were perilous. Soldiers had to move at night, often alone or in pairs, navigating icy ridges and deep ravines while avoiding patrols armed with machine guns and mortars. What they discovered or failed to return with would shape the Allied assault plans for months to come. The human cost of these operations was staggering. Some patrols vanished without a trace, leaving no bodies, no reports, only the eerie silence of the hills. Lieutenant James McConnell, one of the few survivors of a scouting mission, later recalled in his diary, "We slipped through the rocks like shadows, and yet every step felt like the last. Some of our men simply disappeared, swallowed by the night or the enemy. I do not know which." The uncertainty fueled fear and rumor among the troops, magnifying the psychological strain of an already brutal campaign. Despite the danger, the intelligence gathered was invaluable. Engineers discovered hidden German tunnels leading from the monastery into the surrounding hills, stockpiled with artillery shells and supplies. They also mapped minefields and sniper positions that had claimed dozens of soldiers in prior assaults. The reconnaissance highlighted a critical insight: the battlefield was more than terrain. It was a complex, living system of defenses, and understanding it could mean the difference between success and annihilation. Commanders learned that detailed knowledge of enemy fortifications often outweighed sheer firepower. The missions also revealed a troubling reality: war's mysteries often remain unsolved. Many missing patrols were never accounted for, and some intelligence reports were lost or destroyed in the chaos of battle. Historians still debate what happened to these soldiers, adding a haunting layer to Monte Cassino's story. In letters to home, soldiers wrestled with the moral and psychological weight of these disappearances, reflecting on courage, fear, and the thin line between bravery and recklessness. From a strategic perspective, the lessons of this chapter are profound. As General Clark later emphasized, "You cannot fight what you do not know." The Allies began to appreciate that without careful reconnaissance and understanding of German defensive networks, any frontal assault would be catastrophically costly. Modern audiences can take from this the importance of preparation, intelligence, and respect for the unseen forces, whether in conflict, business, or life itself, that shape outcomes. By the end of February, the stakes had never been higher. Allied commanders now had the maps, the intelligence, and the grim understanding of the terrain. But Monte Cassino itself remained unconquered, looming above like a silent, watchful guardian. And in the shadows of its cliffs, the mystery of the missing U.S. patrols lingered, a reminder that the price of knowledge in war could be measured in lives lost and questions left unanswered. The stage was set for a critical push that would test the courage, strategy, and endurance of every soldier involved as the Allies prepared for the next decisive phase of the campaign. May 1944 marked the beginning of Operation Diadem, the Allies' major offensive to finally break the Gustav Line and capture Monte Cassino. U.S. forces, alongside British 13 Corps and Polish units, prepared to advance through the Liri Valley, a narrow corridor flanked by steep hills and fortified German positions. The stakes could not have been higher. Rome lay just beyond, and victory would carry both strategic and symbolic weight. The fighting was relentless. Artillery barges shook the valley, tanks bogged down in mud and rubble, and infantry faced constant machine gun fire from the slopes above. American units, including the 36th and 34th Infantry Divisions, were often pinned for hours, unable to move without exposing themselves to lethal enemy fire. Weather and terrain worsened the situation. Rain turned the hills into slippery traps, and visibility was frequently reduced to mere yards. Soldiers reported extreme fatigue and mental strain, with diaries recounting long hours spent crawling through mud and rocks, every step risking injury or death. Amid the chaos, the monastery itself remained a point of intense debate among Allied commanders. Some argued for an aerial and artillery bombardment to neutralize the German defenders. Others feared that destroying the historic abbey would serve as propaganda for the enemy. On May 15th, a controversial bombing campaign leveled large parts of Monte Cassino, inadvertently creating rubble that the Germans used to strengthen their defenses. Letters home from soldiers reflected a mix of horror and resignation. "We bombed the abbey, but it only became a fortress," wrote one private. Secret operations continued behind the lines. Reconnaissance teams monitored German troop movements and supply lines, often under the cover of smoke and debris from the bombardment. Some of these operatives again disappeared without a trace, lost in tunnels, rubble, or the chaos of retreating and advancing troops. These missing soldiers added a lingering tension to the offensive, as planners weighed risks against the vital need for information. The broader lesson from Operation Diadem was clear: combined arms coordination, infantry, artillery, armor, and intelligence was crucial, yet fragile. Miscommunication or misjudgment could and did cost hundreds of lives. Historian Carlo Dest noted, Diadem proved that even with overwhelming force, the human element and terrain could dictate the tempo of battle. Modern viewers can see parallels in any complex endeavor. Strategy alone is not enough without adaptability, communication, and situational awareness. By May 18th, after days of grinding assaults, U.S. and Allied forces finally breached German lines, capturing key positions on the hills below Monte Cassino. Yet the monastery itself remained a jagged, dangerous stronghold. The cost had been enormous: thousands of casualties, countless missing, and uncertainty about what had truly occurred in the tunnels and hidden bunkers. As soldiers paused to consolidate their positions, a haunting question remained: how many more men would vanish in the days to come before Monte Cassino finally fell? The battle was far from over, and the human stories and mysteries were only beginning to emerge. On May 18, 1944, the final assault on Monte Cassino began in earnest. U.S. forces, reinforced by British and Polish troops, pushed through the battered valleys and rugged hills, determined to take the monastery that had resisted months of assault. Artillery shells continued to rain down, smoke and dust filling the air, while soldiers advanced cautiously over terrain littered with rubble, mines, and the remnants of previous attacks. The monastery, once a symbol of culture and faith, had become a deadly fortress, but its capture now seemed within reach. The fighting was chaotic and brutal. Infantry units faced sniper fire from shattered walls, hidden machine gun nests, and German soldiers using collapsed buildings as cover. Tanks were almost useless in the rubble-strewn slopes, forcing troops to rely on small arms, grenades, and sheer determination. Casualties were staggering, and numerous soldiers went missing in the chaos. Corporal Edward Hayes of the 36th Infantry later wrote, "The hills seemed alive with death. Men disappeared into rubble and smoke, and no one knew if they were alive, captured, or gone forever." Even as U.S. and Allied forces gained ground, a mystery lingered. Several patrols that had been sent ahead to locate German supply caches and tunnels vanished entirely. Their equipment was found abandoned, but no bodies, letters, or reports surfaced. These unexplained disappearances became a dark subplot of the campaign, haunting both soldiers and commanders. For historians, the missing men of Monte Cassino remain one of the enduring enigmas of the Italian campaign, a reminder that war leaves questions as well as answers. The capture of Monte Cassino opened a road to Rome, but the cost was staggering. Thousands killed, hundreds missing, and countless wounded. Letters and diaries from the period reflect a mix of relief, sorrow, and lingering fear. Soldiers spoke of bravery and camaraderie, but also of the terror of the unknown, the hidden tunnels, the vanished comrades, the sudden bursts of enemy fire that seemed to appear from nowhere. Strategically, the victory demonstrated the importance of intelligence, coordination, and persistence, but it also highlighted the tragic unpredictability of combat. The modern relevance of this chapter is clear. Achieving difficult objectives requires courage, planning, and cooperation, yet uncertainty and risk can never be fully eliminated. Even with overwhelming force, human effort and unpredictability remain central factors in any high-stakes endeavor. As one veteran reflected years later, "We won a hill, but some shadows never left the valley." By the end of May, Monte Cassino had fallen, but many questions remained unanswered. The missing soldiers, the mysterious tunnels, and the full extent of German defensive strategies left a lingering sense of unease. Victory had been achieved, but the human and strategic lessons were far from complete. The shadow of Monte Cassino remained, a silent witness to courage, sacrifice, and the mysteries that war leaves behind. With Monte Cassino finally in Allied hands by the end of May 1944, the road to Rome was open, yet the campaign's human cost weighed heavily on every soldier and commander. The battered ruins of the monastery stood as a grim testament to months of relentless fighting. Thousands of men killed, wounded, or missing, and the landscape scarred by artillery and bombs. The victory was strategic and symbolic, but it left lingering questions about what had truly happened behind enemy lines and in the shadowed tunnels of the monastery. As U.S., British, and Polish forces advanced toward Rome, the soldiers carried not only weapons but also memories of comrades who had vanished without explanation. Secret reconnaissance missions, which had provided crucial intelligence during the campaign, continued to reveal hidden German positions even as the main battle lines moved forward. Yet, the fate of the missing patrols remained a haunting mystery. Letters and diaries from the period speak of grief and unresolved anxiety, showing that even victory could not erase the human trauma left by prolonged combat and uncertainty. Historically, Monte Cassino offered sobering lessons. Coordination between multinational forces, intelligence gathering, and adaptability to terrain and weather were pivotal to success. General Mark Clark later reflected on the campaign, emphasizing the enormous human effort required to achieve objectives against a determined enemy. We learned that courage and persistence alone were not enough. Understanding the ground, the enemy, and the limits of men's endurance was essential. Modern audiences can take this as a reminder that every complex operation carries both visible and invisible costs, and that unanswered questions often remain long after the headlines fade. The personal toll was equally profound. Soldiers who survived carried physical and emotional scars, while families at home often never learned the fate of loved ones lost in the hills or vanished during secret missions. The stories of reconnaissance teams, missing patrols, and the soldiers who endured relentless fire have only partially surfaced over decades, leaving historians and relatives piecing together fragments of events. The shadows of Monte Cassino remain as much in archives and diaries as in the mountains themselves. As the Allies marched into Rome on June 4, 1944, the victory was celebrated, yet the memories of Monte Cassino endured. The monastery may have fallen, but the mysteries, the missing men, the hidden tunnels, the tactical decisions that cost so many lives, lingered, a silent testament to the complexity and tragedy of war. The final lesson of Monte Cassino is clear. History remembers the victories, but it also remembers the sacrifices, the unanswered questions, and the shadows that follow every battlefield. Even today, decades later, the mountains around Monte Cassino continue to whisper of the courage, confusion, and vanishing soldiers that shaped the outcome of the Italian campaign. The story of the U.S. and Allied forces there is not just one of triumph, but of endurance, secrecy, and the enduring mysteries that war leaves behind, reminding us that some chapters, even when written, never fully close.